What's up, peoples? What's up? Welcome to Trap No More podcast on this beautiful Sunday evening. I pray that you had a good day today with family. I pray that you made the most of it. And I just want to just really thank you guys for tuning in and supporting the channel. If you haven't already liked and subscribed and share it, do so now. We're going to be here for a while, but I want you to go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button right now before you forget. And don't forget to share it later on, okay? So other people can grab what we're putting out there. So tonight, I'm just going to jump right into it. We have the lovely Miss Sandry with
Hello.
us, and she's going to be sharing her story. I swear, I didn't know her prior to a couple years ago. We didn't grow up together, so don't think I'll just go out to my neighborhood and start pulling people out from the neighborhood. So I'm gonna let her share her story. That's all I'm going to say. So here we are. Thank you.
Here we are.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being willing and brave and just it's not easy sharing your story, and I
No, it
always say
isn't.
this to like the females cuz I think us guys, we feel, really comfortable just putting our stuff out there, but just dealing with my wife, she's very secretive. She's very like, and I find that with a lot of women, especially with the Latino women, you know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like they don't like putting all their business out there, but I thank you that you're willing to come out and support this platform. I shared with you what we're about. Trap Families is all about supporting the families of the addicted and the incarcerated, and your story is definitely surrounded by that. So, with that being said, take us on your story.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. It's true. I think a lot of times I listen a lot more than what I actually share to people, and I think it's part of like the profession. So I appreciate the opportunity. I grew up in La Puente. I've been in La Puente all of my life. I'm 35 years old, and I'm still in La Puente. I left for a short while to Los Angeles, but I returned. I found it was way crazier out there than back home, so I came back home. I grew up in a Mexican household, um, not Chicano. There was no Americans in the house, so it was very interesting. It was like I was living in two countries, as I was growing up, and to a degree, it was confusing because there were things that were done in a certain way at home that when you walked out and you went to school and you met with people and you saw how their houses were run, it was like, well, wait, that's not what we do at my house. So I grew up, with two very young parents. I'm the oldest of seven children. There should have been, I believe, eight or nine of us, but there's seven of us. And I am the oldest. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of like that parentified child, that wounded hero, right? That hero in the family who really from a very young age was conditioned to kind of be a caregiver and to take care of business. So, in life, there's two types of people. There's people that, have big visions and they're very creative and they think about a lot of things. And then there's people that just do things. I would consider myself a doer. I'm the type of person who's just like, let's just make it happen and I get it done. And I think that partly comes from growing up in a house where things just needed to get done. And again, growing up with really young parents who were very traditional in a lot of ways, but they had that kind of desire to want more for their life. So, in a lot of ways, I'm also my mother and father's American dream. You know, um, they didn't go to school growing up. They probably made it till about middle school, and they started having kids real young at like the age of 17. Me, and by the time my mom was maybe 30, she had six children.
Mhm.
I'm 35 now and I can't even believe it. Like I don't know how I would deal with so many children. But what I can say is that um my mom was very young. And so now as an adult and I've done a lot of work on myself, there's a lot of forgiveness that had to take place and a lot of me having to realize where she was, where I was, and that I was growing up and she was growing up with me, in other words. And it was very tough because there was a lot of abuse, um, of all kinds, growing up in a house with about 16 or 17 people all the time. And, my mom was a really hard worker. She's still a very hard worker. So because she was always working and dad was always working, it was kind of like I was the next runner up, right? And so I raised my brothers and sisters. So I was like left at home alone from like the age of maybe 7 or 8, and make sure that they eat breakfast and make sure that so I learned a lot of mature and grown up skills really young. And so I kind of bypassed childhood. And I think to a degree it had a lot of benefits because I didn't get caught up in a lot of what a lot of the people in the town that in La Puente, got caught up in. And, there's that philosophy or that story of like, you know, smart people learn from their mistakes, but wise people learn from the mistakes of others.
Mm.
And I was very fortunate, I think, and I look back now and I see that, it's the grace of God that really kept me from trying drugs, from, going out with lower companions or people that were up to no good, because I grew up and I got to see all of that. I grew up in a house where a lot of my uncles and aunts were really young then, and they were into partying. And I would see sometimes my aunt, like doing cocaine, which now I know, but then I was just like, what's she doing, and I got to see a lot of debauchery in a sense growing up that I couldn't conceptualize. I couldn't put it into words to understand, like, what are these adults doing? But what I remember, Jojo, was that I was very resentful at adults. And I developed kind of like a problem, an aversion to them, per se. Like if anybody had anything to tell me and they were adults, like I couldn't trust it. So, I remember really young, they told my mom that like I just wouldn't listen. I wasn't a good listener. What they now call oppositional defiant. If they told me sit down, I would stand up. If they told me be quiet, I'd speak up louder. I just did not like being told what to do. But it was because I felt really young that there was never any respect. And I realize now that, I grew up in a culture where kids are seen, not heard. So there was never anyone asking, "Hey, how do you feel about this? What do you think about so and so moving in? What do you think about, that person you don't know, staying up in the middle of the night drinking and you're uncomfortable, but you can't really say anything because, that's just what's going to be done." And I see both sides of why my parents did what they did to a degree growing up, but it caused a lot of like I don't want to be like that when I grow up. And I went from school to school. I don't remember how many schools really I've been through, but I got kicked out of school a lot and I was suspended a lot growing up because at home I was beat up all the time by, different adults and mistreated. So when I left the house, it was like no one's going to tell me nothing. So I was not a good schoolmate, a good friend. I was that teacher that like made the teachers cry, that kid that made the teachers cry,
Mm.
And I didn't realize it, but what I was trying to do then was I was trying to prove that belief system that I wasn't good, that something was wrong with me. And I think that came from growing up listening to a very young, frustrated, super angry, bitter mom. You're no good, you're not doing anything right, but I couldn't realize it then, how now, there was a lot of projection, and I see how hurt she was and how much she was going through. But as a child, you just you can't help but to take it personal because you're like,
Yeah.
"Man, like, I didn't ask to come here to
Mhm.
put you through all of this," right? So, it's very, very tough. And the area where I live, like I've said, I've always lived in La Puente. I've lived in a couple of different areas, but they've always been very heavy gang involvement. And, one of the houses that I lived in the longest for like 20 years, from like 5 to like 20, I think, something like that, 20 something. Um, we lived in an area where there was this house at a corner, and to go to the store that was at the corner of the house, we had to pass by that house. And you never knew if you were going to get robbed. You never knew if they were going to come out and like take your bike, if they were going to like say something, because the characters that lived there, even though they were very young,
Mhm.
the house was full of 20, 30 dudes all the time. And I just remember, like, I was like, gangs are not a good thing. Right? They're up to no good. They were always smoking, waiting at at their gate to see who would pass by. And because I was a female, they would always send me instead of the guys.
Mhm.
So that they wouldn't mess with them, right? So I got to see, somebody getting shot and die in front of my house when I was maybe about 9, 10 years old. I don't know who it was, but I remember he was laying on the ground for quite a while before anybody came and picked him up. But it was one of those things that, instead of being like shocking, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened, it was almost like normal
Mhm.
to grow up in a town where you hear gunshots all the time, where you hear just, oh, so and so, this happened to so and so, that happened to so and so. So now, as a mental health professional, I think, you know, I kind of grew up with a complex of, like, again, like that hero, right? And I think, in many ways, that story of the prodigal son.
Mhm.
I was not that prodigal daughter, right? But I was in many ways that righteous brother.
Mhm.
I always did what I was told, and I stayed away from drugs and gangs and people that were not good. I mean, I still had my issues here and there, but I kind of thought, I have 6 younger brothers and sisters behind me, and I was always told, you got to do the right thing because they're always watching. And that was one of my greatest fears, because now I realize, like, in many ways I was a kid, but I was their mother. And so I was terrified of them doing anything wrong. And so it's not that I didn't want to do wrong things. It's just that I wouldn't allow myself, because I would be so afraid that, no, if I do it, they're going to do it too, and
Mhm.
because I really believe that. So I kind of just stayed away from all of that. But I still wasn't doing good in school. um, it wasn't something that was promoted at my house. At my house, sometimes it was like, you clean and you make sure you have food for the day, and that's it. Very much like Mexico.
Mhm.
It's like, we're just gonna worry about today. Like, we're not tripping about you having homework or projects or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it was very difficult, because I remember a lot of times coming home and there'd be no electricity. And
Mm.
it'd be like, man, like, what happened, And, well, we didn't have money to pay for the electricity, so they turn on some candles and we just kind of make the best of it. And that feeling of coming home and being like, okay, we ain't got no lights, we don't have gas, we can't cook. So we never went without food. I will say that I'm very grateful that I never had to experience what it was like to go hungry. And I think I attribute that to growing up in the States, where we would go and get donations from this church or from that church, even though my mom would say, Christians this and Christians that. Those Christians were the ones that would feed us a lot growing up,
Mhm.
because I grew up predominantly in a Catholic kind of like home. Which now, I understand that it's very much like that's just what we know. So we just kind of stick with what we know,
Mhm.
not really true faith or an understanding of what God is. So a lot of my now beliefs about God and who he is and what he has done and all of that, you know, have really changed and shaped the way that I perceive life. But it's all happened like later in adult, like as an adult. But if I could go back to being a really young, girl and having all this responsibility over brothers and sisters, I had a really young dad who he struggled with infidelity. And I didn't know what that was.
Mhm.
I was just, but I would hear it often from my mom. You're just like, you look just like your dad. And there was a lot of anger coming at me, but I didn't get like, why do you hate him so much? Because my dad, to me, he was great. He was a great
Mhm.
dad. He's charismatic, he's funny, he's loving. but I didn't get what where she was coming from. And when I became a young woman and I started to develop an understanding of relationships, his betrayals to my mother hit me in a whole different way.
Mm.
And I remember that I was in a very big way disillusioned by my dad. And then I hated her for it because I said, "Man, like my dad, was a good dad to me, but you didn't have a right to kind of ruin that image, right?
Yeah.
Of him for me." And I think it was something that I've worked through now for a lot of my
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
But I think that to a big degree, I resented that. I resented that her hurt had to damage the view that I had of my father because it wasn't a part of him that I needed to know about. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And I think that that's something that I now as an adult, I work really hard to help parents understand. You know, there's a lot of different parts of us and things that we do and we go through that we're not necessarily proud of, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that you that is going to be transparent and okay to just show everybody. Because as a kid you don't understand. I didn't get like, well, my dad feels disconnected to you. I just saw that she was always angry
Yeah.
and she was always like mad, and I'm like, well, why would he want to be with you? Like, you're always pissed off.
Yeah. And it's like you were saying earlier, don't mean to cut you off, but what you were
Yeah.
saying was about like in the home, you what was it? What was it you said? It's a famous saying, you're there to be seen but not heard or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it wasn't like you could ask questions like, Mom, what's really going on between you and dad? Because it's like mind your own business.
Absolutely.
So that kind of left you just like,
This is just how it is,
mm-hmm,
but it gave me a view of marriage that I remember. I said, I don't want to get married. If this is what marriage is like,
mm-hmm,
which women always get the short end of the deal, that's what it felt like to me, at least, right? I don't want to get married. I don't need a husband. I'll make my own money. I'll do something with my life. Like, I don't need to go through this. And it made me develop a belief that, like, I didn't want to bring kids to put them through that suffering.
mm,
So for a long time I would say, well, I did have kids. I was raising my siblings, but I was also a kid.
yeah,
So, when I turn about 13, 14, um, I have my very first boyfriend, my first relationship. And I become so toxically attached to this person who, didn't have a father, had a mother who struggled severely with mental health to the point where she, like, tried like killing her children at some points, right?
oh,
So you
wow,
could imagine if that was going on with him, and then we get together and it just becomes this, like, this very toxic attachment where I felt kind of like, in my belief, that young, being, what you would call your puppy love, this is someone who I'm going to be with forever. And then that forever was very short lived, right? And it was short lived through betrayal. And it wasn't even like I actually saw cheating of any sort. I just happened to be at school and walked out and saw some girl with her arm around his shoulder, and they might have just been friends, but that was enough for me. And I was like, what is this? Right? So it rocked my world so much that I just left school. I dropped out of school. I was, I think, a junior in high school at the time. And I dropped out of school and I quit my job because we were working together. And I just said, I never want to see him again. And for months, he was calling and begging, and his family was coming over, and the mom was crying, and my mom was crying. And it was like, why? Why did they break up? And I'm just like, I never want to see you again.
dang,
And it was like 5 years together and just cut him off. And I realized something about me, that I had the ability to really love and be cool with somebody, but at the moment that they crossed me, they were dead to me.
dang,
And I couldn't, and it was like really just like that. And it was easy. but it didn't make me a happy person. And I think it was the first time that I identified in my life what depression actually felt like for me. And I remember, like, I lost a lot of weight and I didn't want to go out and I isolated. Mom was like, "You can't just quit school. You got to go back to school, you know?" And I was doing real bad. Like, I had a 0.67 GPA. I was doing terrible. But I decided, fine, I'll go back to school. And I was still giving teachers a really hard time. And I think at that moment, I felt parents don't care, nobody cares, you know. I don't have this best friend I thought that I had because now my relationship's over, you know, because I'd put all my eggs in that basket being so young. And I was never really the friendly type. So I didn't have a lot of girlfriends because girls didn't like me very much growing up. I was always like truly just hated on for random things, you know,
Mhm.
bullied for the way I sounded, bullied because their boyfriend liked me, bullied for a bunch of different reasons.
Mhm.
And I just knew, like, maybe girls and me just don't get along. So I had a lot of guy friends. But you know, and I was very much a tomboy and not doing good. And then I remember that junior year, I had dropped out of that other school and joined this other school and doing real bad. And in the middle of the year, they put me into this class, which was a forensic science class. And the teacher that showed up completely changed the direction of my life. And he was a retired Navy SEAL, in really good shape, would show up all the time, really well dressed. But I was like, yeah, all the teachers get on my nerves. This guy will be no different. But the thing with this guy was every time that I was late, which was every day, every time that I talked back, which was also every day, he would discipline. And the way he would discipline is he would make you do push ups,
Mhm.
he would make you do sit ups. And I was like, oh, no problem. I'm used to doing push ups. I do them all day, like through every
Mhm.
class.
Mhm.
But the difference with this guy was when he gave them to me, he hung up his suit and he got down on the floor and he started doing them with me. And I got up and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And he said to me, you know, you want me to throw you away. You want me to tell you to get out of my class. But I'm not. He said, because you're not what you think you are.
Mm.
You're actually going to make it. You're going to do something with your life. And I was like, yeah, get out of here with that. Like, I don't want to hear that, you
Wow.
know, because
Mhm.
I had come from, believe, like a system where all of my teachers would tell me, you know, growing up, you're never going to do nothing. At 14, you're going to get pregnant and you're going to, you know, you're going to be
Dang.
nobody, you know. And I remember that one of my math teachers, specifically in the 8th grade, would tell me that. Remember me when I come through the drive through at McDonald's because you're going to be a nobody. And I'd be like, oh, okay, you know, and it just created more, reinforced that aversion that I had towards adults, you know. But this guy was different.
Yeah.
And he was very respectful. He was very kind to me. And he showed me discipline, I think, in a very loving way.
Mhm.
And I took on to that and I really respected him. And I wanted, you know, I didn't want him to know that I really respected him, but I also changed my way of behaving. And he had a police academy at that time that was going on here at Bassett High School.
Mhm.
And I said, you know, you think I could be part of that academy, you know? And he said, yeah, you know, yeah, for sure. And it was already more than half of the year. They usually didn't do that, but he made an exception for me. And I became a police cadet, and I joined a law enforcement academy at school. And I had it really in my mind that, you know, I was going to pursue this because I was very passionate about being a bad kid. So now I was like turning it all around. I got so hardcore into like working out and eating well, and you know, just I wanted to be a police, you know, a police detective actually, because part of what they showed a lot in the training was integrity,
Mhm.
discipline, you know, and then also helping the community. And those are things that I think really, really stood out to me and to the character of who I was.
Mhm.
So then I started on that route and I graduated high school. and I was planning to go to Cancun with my friends for my high school trip. And then I come home and I'm working already at the time. I started working when I was 14, by the way. But I come home and I tell my mom, "Hey, I'm so excited. I'm planning to go to Cancun with my friends." And she's like, "What? How are you going to come back?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She says, "You don't have any papers. You can't come back." And I'm like, "What?" Like, you know?
Yeah.
So you can imagine it completely changed the direction of my life at that point, because I'm over here thinking this whole time, like, I have all of these ideas. I finally want to do something with my life. They're offering me this position at Baldwin Park Police Department. I'm working with all these cops. Like, life is going good. What do you mean? And she says, "Yeah, you don't have papers."
You were actually born in Mexico,
I was born in Mexico.
but raised here.
I was brought here when I was about 2.5. But I didn't have recollection of that. It's really interesting because it wasn't until like my 20s that I had a memory of crossing the border.
Oh, for reals.
And I remember that I lost the shoe and that it was very cold. And I was like, did I dream that or was that real?
Wow.
And I remember going to my mom and being like, "Hey, like when we crossed over, like, did I lose a shoe? Because I had this dream?" And she says, "No, you did. You lost the shoe and you were screaming and it was cold. And you kept saying, 'Mom, let's go home, let's go home?'" And I'm like, wow, like, so my earliest memory is crossing the border and then being left at this house while we waited for my parents to cross over, and how mean that lady that was taking care of us was to one of my brothers. And so I was a caregiver since then, and I was two
Mm.
and a half.
Wow.
So it's just very, very impactful looking back at like how, you know, the struggles that the parents go through are embedded within the child's makeup and
Mhm.
the way that the child is going to cope with life. Because
Mhm.
to a big degree, here I am thinking like, no, I'm not going to be that nobody that you said, because I was oppositional. I'm not going to do what you say. But
Yeah.
because they kept telling me you're going to be nobody, I did the opposite.
Mhm.
So even when I found out, hey, you don't have any papers. I remember even my father, and I don't know if these are words that he regrets now, right? But I remember that he was like my only advocate then. And I remember that I told him, "Dad, I want to keep going to college, like even if I can't do anything, because like I really love school."
Mhm.
And he said to me, "Stop wasting your time. What are you gonna go to school for? You don't have any papers. Like you can't do anything." And I was like, man, like I didn't expect to hear that. And it was partly coming from his own frustration
Mhm.
of like, this is just what it is. So I kept going to school. I was working full time, two jobs. I worked at Jack in the Box for a long time, managing Jack in the Boxes and going through that whole fast food and factory working. I don't know how many jobs let me go because I had no social security. I would just work as long as I could, save money, and then they'd come and say, "Hey, sorry, but your social security doesn't check out." And be like, "All right, cool." So there was so many jobs that happened to me, you
Man, why
know?
didn't Richie take you to MacArthur Park?
I remember going there once to get
For
a fake
reals?
ID, you know? I
Dang.
did. So I did all of that, but I was so young
Yeah.
that I was trying to figure out adult problems
Mhm.
as a teenager growing up in America. So it was like difficult for me to
Mhm.
make sense of it. I know it's something that people do now, and that's just the way that life is, and I just didn't get it. But what was really interesting too was, as I was managing a lot of these restaurants, they would always put me in leadership positions, and the people under me were always way older than me,
Mhm.
and they hated it. And they'd be like, "Oh, this mocosa, she doesn't know anything. Why is she, above us?" And I just, even to this day, I have a lot older people under me sometimes,
Mhm.
and it's difficult for them to take that feedback from somebody younger. So I struggled with a lot of ageism, which is what it's called now, right? Because even though I knew that I had all these issues that could possibly happen, they didn't know that I didn't
Mhm.
have papers. They
Mhm.
didn't know that, all of this was happening. So I think it made for a very interesting thing. So now what's really fascinating is I work with people from all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I will have a lot of monolingual Spanish people that will come and they'll tell me their struggles and they'll tell me, man, I have work right now, but I don't know if I'll have work tomorrow.
Mm.
And I know exactly what that feels like. So
Yeah.
I can say, man, and sometimes I'm talking with them and they'll tell me about their situations at work and the immigrant struggle, right?
Yeah.
Because I went through it. And I'll be like, "Yeah, I get it." And they look at me like, "Really?" You don't know how much I get it. Like, I
Yeah.
really get it. And so it is tough. So I have a soft spot for people that, are trying to make it and they have all these obstacles, because I had them and still with all those obstacles and barriers, I kept going. And I just said, I'm not going to stop. I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'm just going to keep going. And so there was moments where I couldn't afford any of my books in college.
Mm.
I could only afford to pay for my classes. But I would pay for the classes and I would go to the library, I would download things, I would try to figure it out. And it got to the point where I was almost at the end to be able to transfer to a four-year university. And they told me, "Hey, because you don't have a social security, like you won't be able to. So you're better off just dropping off right here." And I was like, "Man, so like this is the end of the road." So I was like, "What do I do?" And at that moment, my grandmother, whom I really, really love, she was like my mom growing up to a degree because my mom was always working. So she was at home taking care of me and my siblings sometimes, but she was dying and she was in Mexico. And it was one of those things that kind of had like I need to do something. I need to be able to see her before she dies. And it was one of those things that, like, in my internal, like, conversations, how is this going to happen, God? And it was one of the first times that I started having conversations with God just as I understood him.
Mm.
And I just said, you can't let her die without me seeing her again. She did so much for me. Like, this can't happen that way. And I remember that my mom was already working out to get her papers fixed with my dad. And because I have a brother that was born, with Cre syndrome when I was about 15. So that really humbled my mom. And it humbled her to such a way that she became way less abusive
Mm-hmm.
and she became all about taking care of him. So it took a lot of the heat that was coming towards me and my siblings to focus on him primarily. But it also caused like neglect to a degree because we were
Mm.
just kind of doing what we were doing, right? Without like it really going noticed.
Mm.
So at that point that my grandma's dying, I recall that my mom's going to this lawyer and this lawyer tells her, well, your younger son could get in with you, but Sandry and can't because she's already old, like she's already over 18. I was 20, 21 at the time
Mm.
and had been in this relationship for about 5 years. And we were broken up at that point for like 6 months. You're young, you take breaks, right? Your relationships. We were broken up for 6 months. But my mom comes back and she says, "Hey, the only way you can fix is if you get married." And I was like, hell no, I'm not going to get married. I don't want to get married. Marriage isn't for me because of
Mm.
the way that I had seen, because I knew that it was something very serious and I took it very serious. But I just didn't see anybody being serious about it.
Mm.
So I just said, "No, there's no one, there's no suitable people to marry right now." And she said, that's the only way. And my grandma being so sick kind of just kicked me into this urgency of like, it's now or it's not going to happen. So this ex-boyfriend I had at that time called me and he said, "Hey, what's going on?" I told him the story. And then I said, "You know what? This is it. You either get marry me or don't ever call me again. We're really done forever." And he was like, "Are you serious? But I'm only 20. I'm so young." And I said,
Yeah.
"No, no, 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 no. Like we either get married now or it's not gonna happen." And he went back, told his mom and his family, and they weren't happy about it because they thought he was too young, and he was, but so was I.
Mm-hmm.
And He said, "Fine, I'll marry you." And it was like, "Okay." But I went in with this mindset, Jojo, of like, if anybody's gonna deserve this part of me, which was not a good part, because I was going into that marriage resentful as hell because I did
Mm-hmm.
not want to get married. It's you, because you've been with me for 5 years and you've up and down, and it's just like you deserve this. And so I got married. We got married, in Norwalk, just signed paperwork. It was nothing big. But I said, "You go home and I stay home." Mom's like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, he can live with his mom and I'm just gonna stay here. I'm not ready to go yet." So I stayed at my mom's. And he lived, at the Peas, and I lived about a block away from there. And
Mm-hmm.
so we would see each other all the time, but we lived apart for like 7, 8 months till my mom just said, "You know what? I'm tired of your partying," because I was drinking a lot then and partying like all the time. Because I was like, if I can't do anything else, I'm just going to go have fun, like I can't go to school, I can't work. It was very difficult. So she said, "No, you can't do this. You're married now." Very traditional, you got to go to your husband's house. What house? He lives with his mom, right? In my thinking, like, I don't want to go there. But she's like, "No, I'm sorry. That's just the way that it is." So she kicked me out. And so I show up there to the P's, and I got to live in this one bedroom. And I'm like, and it's tough too, because it's a whole different, even though he was Mexican too, it was a whole different vibe. He was the only boy. Imagine growing up with three women and didn't have a father. So he was his mom's like little prince.
Mm.
And I'm just like, it ain't me. I'm not the one, you know? So it,
Yeah.
it was it was it was rough, and I did that for a long time, and we became really good friends, and we did love each other a lot, as just really good. We became family members because that's what happens in marriage, right? Marriages go through stages. And I think after that initial stage of like infatuation, you elevate to a familial state where
Mm-hmm.
now it's like we're family. And if you could ride that state, together, ups and downs, then maybe you'll make it to like, that third stage where
Mm-hmm.
now you're just comfortable with each other and things are good. I don't think we ever made it past that second stage.
Mm.
You know, um I was always very intense for where he was at, and he could never really do life. I was working, I was going to school, I was doing a lot, and he just couldn't work. And when he did, it was just always fixated on, "Oh, well, I'm going to do this for my mom." And he was still very childlike in a lot of ways. So it kind of put a monkey wrench in our relationship. And to be fair, I was still very resentful.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of times where we should have gotten a lot closer, in our relationship, but we were apart because I was like, "You don't want to go out, you don't want to do anything. See you later then." And I'd take off with friends, and he'd tell me, "Don't go." And I'd be like, "Well, you don't want to come, you don't want to do anything, like, see you later." And I'd leave and I'd just kind of be living my life. And so in a lot of ways, I was an individual,
Mm-hmm.
even though I was married.
Yeah.
And
So you
mhm.
getting married though, did your plan end up working out to going and seeing your mom? Were you able to get papers?
It did.
Because I mean that's what it kind of
That's what it was.
that's what it was for
It
originally,
in a
right?
lot of ways, but then it turned into the real deal. And I did fix papers, and I remember that the first time I got to go to Mexico to visit my grandma, which was like 2012, it was very impactful for me because she didn't look anything like what I remembered her. She was emaciated, she was diabetic, so there was a lot, she was on dialysis, and I hung on to her and I just sobbed for like, probably a straight hour cuz I just couldn't believe what had
Mm-hmm.
happened. How did so much time go by, and I hadn't seen her, and now she was so sick, and it was really rough. And but God was like so good because he kept her for like 5 years after that. And I
Mm.
got to see her 2 or 3 other times. And it was really nice. But when she did die finally, and at this point I was already, exiting my relationship, and I was getting my master's degree, and so much had happened in the experience of life that I had had,
Mhm.
serving communities, working with, the drug addicted. And, in a lot of ways, I think I was serving the drug addicted community, and I had it at home. I had my brother who struggled with addiction to a degree, a sister who struggled, a lot of I don't know how many family members, criminal addictive thinking, like you just can't believe. And I felt like such a fraud. Here you are going to work every day, helping people recover from these things, and you can't even take care of what you got at home.
Mm.
And it was very tough,
Yeah.
and in sitting there having these conversations, with my siblings, like, you guys don't have to live like this, don't do this, don't do that, you know, picking up my little sister, or noting that, one of my sisters, in jail multiple times. And I'm thinking, wow, how could this be? But I tried so hard, and I
Yeah.
would think I would take it personal. Jojo, I would take it personal because I would see all the suffering that happened in her children.
Yeah.
And I would say, "Why? Why do you do this to them on purpose?" Like, that just, to me, it was very difficult to understand, going again in that righteous thinking, right? That I didn't do all these things. So why are you? I don't
Yeah.
understand. And I recall that I would judge her pretty harshly because, she was stealing, she was using, meth, she was like just running amok, running the streets like a man.
Mhm.
And it would bother me and it would hurt me so much because I'd be like, mom and dad have worked so hard to provide what they have so that we are where we are. And to be fair, my nuclear family, mom, dad, brothers and sisters, they're not gang involved at all.
Yeah.
They're not addicted. They're not alcoholics, they're not drug users, like, so to see this happen, at the level of, like, now, a younger sibling or brother, it was so painful because it's like everybody else is doing it around, but why you can't? So it was rough. And I remember one time I was working at this AIDS agency with people with HIV and AIDS, and there was this colleague of mine there, social worker, African American woman, really, really godly woman, really nice woman. And I was crying in my office, and we shared an office together because my sister had gone to jail.
Mhm.
And and I was speaking about it with her in confidence as a friend, And I was saying all these things from a place of hurt. And she looked at me and she said, "Sandry, like, you're judging her really harshly and you don't know what she's been through."
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, what has she's been through, because I'm the one that took all the beatings. I'm the one that made sure that, like, nobody hurt her or my other siblings. So I took on all that trauma. So they didn't have to." And she said, "But she took on vicarious trauma from watching you take all of that." And I was like, "What?" And it dawned on me. And she said, "The people that are just observers
Yeah.
are hurt even worse
That's right.
because they feel guilty."
They can't save you. They can't, they're the little ones, and they deep down
Yes.
inside, they're like, like, leave my sister alone because you were like the mom figure to, all your younger siblings. And yeah, I can relate. I mean, I could understand that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's hard for us to be like, like, I did everything to protect them, and look at how they still turn out. And, there's a lot of guilt and shame that falls back on us.
Yeah.
And I could imagine all the expectations on you being the oldest, and you're the one that's being, I mean, even when they did something, you were probably the one getting hit and
Beaten.
everything, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you're supposed to watch over them.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be doing
Yeah.
this. Yeah, that was rough. I could only imagine that's being rough, but
It was always very difficult. And but you know what, though? I think it humbled me to hear that coming from someone else who I knew she had good intentions towards me. And she said, "It's not personal.
mhm.
Don't take it personal.
And don't trip.
Don't trip." And I was like, "But look at what she's doing." And she said, "I know. And I know it hurts you, but
Yeah.
it's not personal to you. She has to work out her own
Yeah.
issues." And that's when I realized, like, this was like right before I became a therapist. I realized that I had this complex of like always trying to just make things okay for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you
So
had
it's
that here. You had that
it's
hero
just so
that
natural in
yeah.
me, which we call a wounded healer, right?
Mhm.
Like I just know what's wrong and I want to go into let me fix it for you,
Yeah.
you know? But I couldn't do that. I
Mhm.
can't continue doing that because, I learned that when I do that, I'm seeing whether it's a family member or a friend or even a client now, when I go in to do that, I'm
Mhm.
seeing them as weaker than me.
Yeah.
And they're not.
Mm-mm.
They're not weaker than me. So I have to be able to respect that and honor that. And so that was really enlightening for me. And I think it changed the relationship that I had with my siblings, where I was able to ask her to like just, I'm sorry that I judged you.
Yeah.
I don't understand what it's like to be you because I just understand what it's like for me.
Yeah.
But it was very hurtful because at moments where we would have arguments, I remember one thing she said to me one time. She said, "I'm sorry, Sandry, that we can't all be perfect like you."
Mm.
And it stung so deep because I'm here thinking, like, you don't even know how hard it's been. And the fact that I did it for you and you're taking it like I'm trying to, make myself seem better than, and
Yeah.
so it very humbling experiences. And I think it's brought our family very close and a lot of healing to the
Yeah.
family. And a lot of those experiences are used now to really help other individuals.
Yeah.
In my work now with a lot of the women, in jail and treating men and both men, women, and adolescents convicted of sexual offenses. A lot of like what has happened to me and that I've experienced is used to really help other individuals.
Yeah.
And I'm like, at the end of the day, it's like, well, it's for God's glory, right? This is all just what had to happen and it had to happen that way. And
Yeah.
that's just where I'm at now. I don't resent or regret anything that I've
Yeah.
been through.
Yeah, it's hard seeing our family members go through that process, but it's like they have to go through their own process to get to their calling and their giftings and whatnot, because same way with me. I mean, not like you, but I was the bad kid. I was the
Mhm.
one that was, always in the mix and everything. And when I finally got my life together, even though it was through that span of prison time, and when I came home, I became a drug and alcohol counselor too, behavioral modification counselor. And it hurt me though to see my family, being where they're at and trying to share with them, how to get right. And they wouldn't listen. And I sometimes I just realized, God gave me this revelation that, what, in their process, it's best that you're just there with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just pray that, just pray that God sends somebody to them that they could relate to and
Yeah.
whatnot, because it's so hard for our family to accept our help sometimes, you know what I mean? And it's like, why? Like we see the damage, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We see it, and but it's just like family don't receive it from us.
It's like that scripture says, right? Like a prophet's not known in his own land. Like
Yeah,
they just can't take it, and it's true. It's very true. So I just don't I'm removed from it now,
yeah,
I mean, it's still hurtful to a degree. I have cousins, doing serious time, looking at serious time. I've lost cousins to gang violence. One of my baby cousins was murdered a couple of years ago, and it really rocked my family. And this is I saw him grow up. He was a baby boy, and I saw him grow up and develop into, and what the streets did and what life had done. And he didn't come from a very different place than I did, and so it just it's those questions that like why them and not me,
mm,
you
I'm
know?
familiar with that question. I asked myself that 1,000 times, but
Eh,
God's all knowing. He knows
right.
why. It's
Eh,
His plan and His purpose.
correct. And I remember that when he passed too a couple years ago, I was reading that parable of Lazarus and the rich man. And that part where he says to Lazarus, where he says to the rich man, he says to Lazarus, the rich man, "Please go and tell my brothers, tell my sisters and my brothers," and he says, "Nah,
Yeah.
they have the prophets, and they still don't believe." and I just related to that so much because I'm like, man, like here I am on fire for the Lord, telling and everybody. I mean, you know, when you barely get saved and you're just like proselytizing to everybody. Someone said even including the dog, the cat, right? Like
Mm,
hear the gospel, right? So I was just going to everybody in my family, and then I lose this cousin, and you know, and I start to see all these things, and it was almost like the heat went up
mm,
when I came to the Lord, you know, and I kept telling them the only way is God, the only way is God, you
mm-hmm,
know. And we've been through some serious losses, you know. My sister lost a baby, my nephew, stillborn at 9 months, like last year, and it really also rocked my family. And she was a brand new believer, her and her husband, and you know, I was really scared that she was gonna like just go back into maybe drinking and like not doing good. And the Lord strengthened me so much during that time to be that, like, you know, that person in their life,
mm-hmm.
to just guide them spiritually and pray for them and tell them it's going to be all right, you're going to get through this, you know, don't lose hope. And so I think, if at anything, all of these experiences, what they have caused for me is the ability to instill hope in people, to
Yeah,
let them know that, you know, we can never lose hope, that we can't allow ourselves to become, you know, hopeless,
yeah,
even when it feels like and nobody gonna come to an aid, you know. And so I just, you know, that's something that really, you know, has been empowering, you know, to be able to be that beacon of light and hope for people, you know.
yeah,
So despite, yes, I got my own struggles, but what's good with you, what's going on in your life, you
mm-hmm,
know. And I think that that's how we overcome what we go through,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. That's so cool. Hey, you know what I was thinking too, because I was hearing about your struggles in early school and stuff, and you not, just was Spanish your first language, like
Yes.
going through school? Yeah. So
Yes.
did you like was that an issue growing up? Like
I would tell you that, yeah, I mean, initially, I think, you know, from the memories that I have from my mom telling me, you know, I picked it up real quick. I was a
English?
really, yeah, like I started speaking it very young. I was speaking by like before I was 1.
Mhm.
And so when I came here to the States, it was like I was in school at 3 years old. They put me into Head Start and a bunch of different schools from 3
Oh, okay.
because they worked all the time. So
Yeah.
because I started school much earlier than, you know,
Mhm.
other kids at 5 or 6, I was already speaking it. So I know ELD was like a thing when I was growing up, just because you were Hispanic, you were
Mhm.
usually in those classes.
Yeah.
But I think I lost my accent when I was maybe in about like 2nd or 3rd grade. So they pulled me out of ELD and they had me in regular classes.
Mm.
But I know that I had cousins that had come from Mexico, and one of them specifically that was in class with me growing up, and they would always separate us because his English was just not at the level that it should have been.
Mhm.
But I could see how it causes harm in the school system, because
Yeah.
it's like, well, you know, yeah, we don't, you know, we're not the same, even though it's a challenge though.
Yeah.
Even now,
Yeah,
I
no.
read a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember being young. I remember being young and having some friends that didn't speak English, you know what I mean? And I remember in school, like even like for me, I didn't speak Spanish fluently at all. Especially like I think when I was younger, I maybe did a little bit more because my grandmother then would speak to me in
Yeah.
it, but I'd always answer in English and stuff. But I remember they would be struggling in school and they were asking me, like, just
Help.
like what are they saying? And I'm like,
Mm,
why is he in this class? Why isn't he somewhere else where he
right.
could understand this stuff?
Right.
And because of that, he got frustrated. He'll be fighting. Like I could see him. There's one specific one that I remember, Tomas, and I remember he would get so frustrated and he was always fighting at a young age because he was embarrassed, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And it was just like I could imagine. So, knowing that your mom and dad were, first generation
Hmm.
Mexicans, that I was thinking like maybe you were just being brought up just with Spanish in the home and that
Yeah.
was a struggle for you because, but
Yeah. You get beaten. My mom hated it. Don't speak English in my house, you know? She couldn't understand it. So
mhm,
we just couldn't, you know. And my dad started to try to learn really early. So he would learn it well enough to where we could respond, like you're saying. He'd speak to us in Spanish, but we could talk to him in English. So we could do that with my father, but with my mom,
Mhm.
not even one word. To this day, don't speak to her in English,
Oh,
right?
for
Speak to
real?
her in Spanish, yeah. So it's still very much like that. But I think also the thing I wanted to say is like going back to like Tomas, right?
Mhm.
When we think of like really young children who still don't have a vocabulary and they get so frustrated because they're trying to communicate something,
Mhm.
but they don't have the words.
Yeah.
And so you see the tantrum, you see the anger, you see the frustration. And in a lot of ways, even growing up in homes where there's a lot of heavy abuse or traumatic experiences, difficulty, a myriad of things that kids just don't understand. You might have vocabulary, but ain't no one hearing you.
Yeah.
Ain't no one asking you what you think about it,
Yeah.
how it affects you, how separations affect you, how your cousin or your primo or whoever, your dad, your mom going to jail, how that impacts you.
Yeah. And you could have all that communication, but the trauma
Yeah.
prevents you from saying anything because if you open your mouth, you're gonna get hit. You're gonna say the wrong thing, and you're gonna get in trouble. And
Or CPS is going to come down and it's going to be tough. I remember a
yeah,
lot of times CPS coming to my house and, hey, we got a call from the neighbor. Can we talk to you? And my mom be over there, and social worker right here. And did she hit you? And I look at social worker
like nope.
and my mom in the back like, "We're not saying nothing," and I was like, "If I do, they might take me away and I might suffer worse
Who's going to look out for my siblings?
than knowing that if I stay here, at least I know what I have to look forward to and
Yeah.
what how to get through it." So, it was a difficult thing, very difficult thing, and it
Mm,
happened a lot of times.
yeah. What's going on, Rob? We're good. Oh, sorry about that. We thought we had a little
A
break
little
in a
glitch.
little glitch in the video.
Yeah.
But yeah, though, and you know what? That's a part of the coaching calls that I have to experience with families is that and I've shared this so many times
Yeah.
is that you know I could only speak for our culture. You know what I mean? It's very secret. What happens in our home, we don't let it escape. To the
Better
schools
stay
or
at
another. It,
home.
it stays at home. What happens at home stays at home. And if not, you're really looking to get something. But yeah, and that's kind of where our whole little trap families comes from is that like just that heavy generational curse of like not being able to break through and
Yeah.
live free,
Yeah.
and that's crazy though, just hearing your story, I mean, that's not my story, but I've heard it often, and I knew other families that were going through something like that, especially like the oldest sibling. When I heard that, I was like, oh man, she got the bad end of the stick. You know what I mean? Being the
Yeah.
oldest, like everything always falls back on the oldest. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
man, so it's crazy though, just hearing your story and hearing about what you witnessed. I mean, prior to us coming live, you shared about your cousins, which you just said, other family members that were involved in gangs and everything. And for you to slide from that and you know, it's crazy how you were able to make it out.
And I wanna also say, like, it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't, partaking, because I was, writing with adults since I was like 8, like just got to see drive-bys and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? And then as a teenager, I was hanging out with people much older than me.
Mhm.
So, part of car clubs and all kinds of stuff. So, but I just, for some reason, always had someone around to say,
Mhm.
hey, don't drink that. Hey, don't smoke that. Hey, even though I got to see a lot of the gang involvement, like I always had someone saying, not you.
Mhm. This ain't for you.
This ain't for you. So, and I know, obviously, I know that that's all, the grace of God, because I know many, many people who that
Mhm.
just was not the case. No
Yeah.
matter how hard they tried to get away from it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
So I heard you've mentioned, the grace of God and,
mhm,
faith, and you're talking about God. How did that come about? Like, when did your faith? Because I know you said you were brought up like in the Catholic,
yeah.
and then eventually you had a conversion to becoming a Christian. So how what does that look like? I mean, what led up to that?
So it happened. I've always believed in God.
Mm,
And, since I was young, now looking back, I had a lot of like experiences in my upbringing that I always believed in God. And even though I grew up in a house that looked like a cathedral with all kinds of saints, right? I was never like, I just never was drawn to that, and I grew up in a house where I heard a lot about witchcraft and, things like that, even my own mom sometimes, doing stuff like that. And I always had kind of like this, I don't like that. Don't do that. That's not okay with God. And I just always knew it in me. But every time I'd say something, it was like, no, like, this isn't that bad because this, because, just traditions and things like that.
mhm.
So, anyway, when I moved out of the house and I went through my divorce, my first separation with my ex husband, I was going through a really tough time. I had a Job moment, what that means? Like when
Mhm.
you lose your job, you lose the family. I just lost everything at that point. And I was in a really, I think, like sad, isolated space that I packed all my stuff and I said, I'm going to New York. And I went to my parents and I said, you know what? Like, I'll be back in a few weeks. I'm going to drive to New York.
You're going to drive, just
I'm
drive?
just going to drive to
Did you
New
know
York.
somebody in New York?
No.
Or not? You're just like, I'm just going to the other
I'm just
side of
gonna go
the.
to a road trip. So I packed up my car and I took off and I drove through, all the way and all the way back, 42 states, and I stopped at multiple different places and I got really close to God. A lot of those really like late nights, just staying at a truck stop or staying at a random hotel or whatever. I got to just be alone with God a lot. And I journaled the whole time because that's how I
Mm,
do a lot of my best praying, right? Through journaling. But before that, going back really quick, I was going through my practicum at school and I went to Cal Baptist University. But I was like not really fully like I'm a Christian, I didn't even know what it meant.
mhm.
I just had heard that Christians are hypocrites and Christians this. So that's what you hear, in a Catholic home a lot of time growing up. And so I just kind of had this view of Christianity that was not real.
Mhm.
And I had this client, and this client was like Lutheran something, right? But he was going through things. And I remember that I felt like I couldn't help him because I didn't know scripture. So, because in the Catholic faith, you're not really taught to read your Bible.
Mhm.
The priest is the only one that can read it. Like you're just there doing what they say.
Mhm.
So I remember that I went to my supervisor at the time and I said, hey, like he needs help and I don't know that I can help him because, well, don't you believe in God? And I said, absolutely, I believe in God. I've always believed in God. Who would be crazy to not believe in God? I'd never even met atheists. I didn't even know it was a
Mhm.
thing, right? I just assumed, how could people not believe?
Mhm.
But I don't know scripture and
Mhm.
I don't know anything about the Bible. And then he said to me, well, why don't you come to Bible study? And I said, okay. So I started going every Wednesday. And out of nowhere, I'm like, is he talking to me? I started feeling like everything he was speaking, he was talking to me, my exact situation. And I started like feeling like this, just like this thing happening, and I
Mhm.
couldn't really explain it. But from then on, it just kind of continued for maybe like a year or so. I just kept reading the scripture and it didn't make sense to me at first, and little by little I just started kind of developing a, okay, I want to, I want this. And that took a few years before I finally came to what I know now was like being born again,
Mm.
and it happened during COVID actually. I was thinking this whole time that I was a believer, and here I am amidst in COVID, like just suffering. And I'm sitting in this big table I had in my living room, and I'm reading the book of Deuteronomy at that time. And there's this passage in there where the Lord tells Moses, I took you out of Egypt. I did this for you and I did that for you and you went back. Like, what are you doing?
Mhm.
And it like convicted me so hard that I started like remembering like, man, that was a sin. You know what I mean? Like he for months just brought to my remembrance
Mhm.
all of the things, because remember when I started, I told you like I had this kind of like Pharisee like belief, right? That like I'm better than because I haven't done drugs and I haven't done those things. And he says, "You really think you're good? Let me show you how good you are."
Mhm.
And he started pulling up all of these things that I had never even considered were something against him.
Mhm.
And I had like my first true experience of like repentance and contrition.
Amen.
And I was like, okay, I'm not good. You know, and then everything kind of changed for the better since then.
Mm.
You know, and I've just a lot of my free time is now just spent getting to know the Lord better, learning theology. I love learning. So I just like I just want to learn and want to learn and and grow and keep growing, and that's what I spend most of my time now. Before I used to just live for traveling and like hanging out and what's next, and now none of that is really interesting to
Mhm.
me. And so that's how it happened. It happened during COVID.
That's awesome.
After me just spending some serious time like reading scripture and praying. Yeah.
When you said you were going to New York, I started thinking of Forrest Gump. Like I was just going to drive and I was just going to drive.
That's exactly how it was.
And then I got tired and then I came back.
Yeah,
That's crazy, but that's
yeah.
awesome. That's awesome story. And I could only imagine, you just driving and just like going through these different states and God's just speaking to you and you're seeing God's beauty
Mhm,
around you. Cause
mhm,
I know
mhm.
once we leave California, it seems like everything starts to get more beautiful for some reason for
Yeah.
me. You know what I mean? I mean, probably just because I'm just
No,
always
it's
here in
true.
California, but just traveling and seeing things different, it gives us a
Yeah,
different perspective. But
yeah.
man, that's an amazing story. And I know, man, there's still so much more that I
There
know you
is.
could share because with all of that being said, with everything you said about the hardships with your papers and about schooling and just having enough just for your class and not your books. And man,
Mhm.
there's a lot. But I'm hearing that you're getting ready to get your doctor's
Uh, and
degree.
my doctorate, yeah. So I've been working on my doctorate for several years now, but there's been some barriers because of the subject matter. We live in a very sexual, like free society, and with a lot of the issues, of gender identity, LGBTQ plus stuff, kink community, I mean, all of that stuff. Like I mentioned, I've been working the majority of my experience, as a clinician treating men and women convicted of sexual offenses. So I see the damage that pornography causes, not only on the individual, but on the family, on their
Mhm.
partners, on their children, on society, on the world, on multiple levels, biopsychosocial, spiritually. So my topic of my dissertation is I wanted to really look at how problematic pornography use impacts women of color,
Mhm.
specifically Latino, African American women, non Caucasian women, anybody who's considered,
Mhm.
a color. And I wanted to do that because I feel like it has such a deep impact, but it's so shameful to talk about.
Mhm.
And like you said, it's a secret. What happens at home stays at home. But it has the impetus and the possibility of causing significant, not only psychological, mental, but like also physiological issues. And we have a lot of our people in our community dying a lot sooner than they need to, and having
Mhm.
heart attacks and high blood pressure issues and diabetes and all these other issues that they're having, related to just how much trauma they just freaking hold on to. And they won't talk about it because it's so shameful and it's painful to say, hey,
Mhm.
this is what's happening in my family. This is what's happening to my marriage. And also because, that's one of the main reasons why my last relationship ended,
Mhm.
and so I know on a personal level, but also on just like a clinical level, psychological level, how much damage it causes.
Mhm.
And so there's been a lot of like, no, you can't say that. No, you can't say that. I've been accused of kink shaming and, all kinds of other stuff because the world just, says it's okay and it's not an issue. And so it's taken me a little while, but hopefully I'm almost through it, more than halfway,
That's
so it's
exciting.
exciting. Yeah.
That is exciting. Rob, go ahead and open up for the calls. Um, so as we get ready to wrap up,
Hmm.
not just now, but
Yeah.
we're gonna open up the phone lines just in case any of our viewers wanted to call in or whatnot. We'll see if anybody. Sometimes they get a little gun shy calling in, but you were talking about some deep stuff, so hopefully we'll get somebody to call in. But I really want to thank you. And man, shout out to Yvonne for
Yes.
putting you out
Yes.
there and
Yvonne's the
wanting to.
best.
Yeah, she's awesome, man. And for you guys that don't know, I'm like very blessed to be here next to her, because her husband is my mentor. And for you guys that know me, I always speak about the Walden House. That's my family. That's my recovery foundation. That's my biggest support network. I would even say even more than my church. I mean, I love my church and everything like that, but when it comes to a lot of my personal things around the home and whatnot, I always lean back to my Walden House family, because um they're always there at a phone call. You know what I mean? I know
Yeah.
my brothers are there, my Christian brothers are there as well, and but my Walden House family, that we have a saying, as they have our back. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm yet to be proven wrong from any of them. And so for Richie though to be my mentor, to be your
Mhm.
husband, I don't need to
He-
tell you how great of a man he is,
No,
but
he is great.
I mean, there it is funny, and I share this once in a while, but once in a while, mainly when I'm speaking to men and their transitions back in a home, because my wife, you've met my wife, I love my wife.
Yeah.
Shout out to my wife, Dahlia. She's
Yes.
my
Hi,
everything.
Delia.
That's my queen. You know what I mean? But when I first came home, oh my goodness, we were bumping heads. And Richie was my therapist, my
Mhm.
mentor, everything in program. So I used to, when me and Dahlia would bump heads and go at it, I would be like, I would use every single tool that I had in my toolbox, my recovery toolbox. I would count, I would breathe, you know what I mean? I would ground myself. And this lady was just driving me crazy. And I'd be like, I need to step outside. I'll call Richie. Hey, Richie, I did everything you taught me
Yeah.
to do, and I'm
What
still about
now?
to catch a domestic violence case because this girl is getting on my nerves.
Mhm.
But it's so funny though, because he would like repeat everything you just said. Just go back and repeat everything.
Play the tape.
Yeah. You got to like play it all the way out. Remember,
Mm.
don't act off of your emotions, man. Just be cool. And here we are,
Yes.
almost 20. I think this August is gonna be 20. I lost count. I think it's like 21 years being free, and comes through a lot
That's
of
great.
your
Hmm.
husband's, coaching of me and giving me the opportunity to,
That's
sit under him and learn how to, regulate my feelings and my actions and all that stuff. But
that's
yeah,
great. That's
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah. But I'm man, thank you for sharing your story, because that's, what a lot of my viewers, they're going through that. They're
Yeah.
not, they're still going through that,
Yeah.
you know, and you give a lot of hope to them that, what, regardless of what you're facing, you can still pursue your dreams. And
Yeah.
man, that is so
And I
awesome.
think also it really allows you to the way that you treat that struggling family member. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not from a place of judgment, but it changes your way of like being able to treat them, right? With a lot more compassion and
Yeah.
a lot more still with a lot more compassion, which can sometimes be difficult when you're that close
Mm-hmm.
because you're like you think that they would just if I speak hard to them, they're going to get it, but you realize that it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I learned over the years, because I've always been like a black and white person with little space of the
Yeah.
gray. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I
Yeah.
mean, that's just my structure growing up. It's yes or no. It's
Right.
never a maybe. It's
Make up
never
your
like,
mind.
yeah, either cold or hot. I've always hated that middle place. You know what I mean? And
Me
I
too.
I hated to be in that middle place. So when I made that crossover from, that gang mentality to my spirituality, it was like I'm going full force with my spirituality as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's it's taken a lot of maturity for me to meet people in the gray and try to help them either way. And I was like you. I mean, in a lot of different ways, I came with that judgmental spirit, like, not that I was better than them, but kind of like, if you don't want my help, forget you then, or
Right.
whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was
Yeah.
easy for me to give up on people just because I was like, I ain't gonna waste my time on somebody that don't want my help. You
Right.
know what I mean? And if you're not
Right.
going to practice what I'm trying to tell you, forget you.
Yeah.
And sometimes I gotta check myself as God's checking me, because I do, for reals. I ain't lying. Sometimes it's like I'll just wipe my hands like quick. You know what I mean? Once they
Mhm.
give me the indication, like they're not going to follow what I
It's
say,
cool.
it's like, I'm good, man. Somebody else needs my help. But
Yeah.
I've learned though to like really, really just be there in the moment with them as they go through that. Cause I remember when I was going through it, and
Mhm.
I had people like your husband that would just be able to bring me back to a place and be like, you're cool, man. Like, you got this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And I needed somebody like that. So now I try to be that person now, when they're going through it and they don't, even with my family,
Yeah.
because when I first came home, I'm not for reals. I was kind of like, I'm trying to stay away from all negativity. I'm
Mhm.
trying to stay away from everybody that ain't on the same path as me. Forget you. I don't got time for that. But now, I mean, I have my boundaries and whatnot, and I know how to, step in, but not stay into situations. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
It's very important.
Yeah, but it's not easy when you're involved in people's lives. Being involved in the
No.
people business, it's not easy.
No.
Especially like when we're always trained to leave our jobs at work, but how do you leave it at work? That's like so hard. I
Yeah.
know for people like us, we dump it on God and be like, Lord,
Yeah.
all of this stuff, like,
Yeah.
give me rest, because I mean,
And
the things
sometimes
we
that's the only prayer, Jojo. Sometimes I know it. This happened to me not that long ago. Sometimes I'm like, Lord,
yeah,
like there's nothing else. There's nothing else that really is going to do justice for the amount of things that you have in your heart sometimes,
yeah,
because it's to a big degree, bearing other people's burdens, right? Like being able to just take those on, and then what do I do with them now? And you
yeah,
see them get better, and now you see them smiling, and you see a little
yeah,
bit more peace, a little bit more joy in them.
yeah.
But then you come home and I'm like in bed, depressed. And I'm like, what's going on here? Where's this coming from? Like,
And
I'm fine,
yeah,
but it's taking that on because it's energy, right?
yeah.
It's energy, but it's to a big degree also spiritual.
Oh yeah,
And so it's like now I've taken that on, that person's better, but then what do I do with it now? And so absolutely having that place, where you take it to the Lord is like very, very important.
yeah,
It sucks for the people that don't have that,
yeah,
because they'll talk about self-care this and self-care that. And I'm like, get out of here with that. Like,
yeah.
that
It works to a
works.
certain
That
degree, but
works too.
yeah,
And then it's like, hey, you could only travel so much. You could only,
take so many days off.
so many
Yeah,
days off. And then you're still spiritually, emotionally exhausted.
yeah. And
You
even
know?
at work, in the workplace, because I know, like you and like me, we worked in the secondary world.
Hmm.
We work where we can't just openly, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
as a Christian, we learn to, follow the rules, and
Yeah.
we respect people's policies and
Yeah.
whatnot. And but it's like we have that silent prayer as we're sitting across from that person. We're just like, Lord, touch this person. You know what I mean? There's sometimes I'd be like, come here, let me put some oil on your head.
Let me anoint
I
you
need to
real quick.
anoint you right now, because you really going through it. You know what I
No,
mean?
absolutely. You see,
Yeah.
especially like there's just so many people living deceived. And that's one of the conversations. I'm very blessed to be, like I said, married to Richie, who's a clinician as well, because, you know, I can have that person who knows like how tough it is sometimes, and we could be that mutual support for one another and consult on things. And it's very, I think it's very, very, it's such a blessing,
Yeah.
because when you're with somebody who has no idea
Yeah.
what it's like, it could be very challenging, and you check out, they check out. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about, so
Yeah.
yep,
It's true.
absolutely.
It's true. Because my wife, there's so much that she didn't understand about me and what I was going through, where my head was at times. And I'll be like, hey, please just let me just go through this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to announce real quick, if you didn't see it on the banner right there, or maybe you're just listening. We are accepting phone calls right now at 626-367-9275. I know a lot of you have told me before that, you listen to to the podcast and you ain't even really watching it. But if you would like to call in and give some feedback, we're open to your calls. It's 626-367-9275. And we're also going to put her contact on there. Like she said, her and her husband, they have a private practice,
We do
right?
radical counseling and
Radical
consultation.
counseling. And
Yeah.
I could imagine it being radical, right? And radical doesn't mean just all over the place. It just means that, they're going kind of like what I was just saying right now. I know my mentor, and loving, do, passionate, and he's gonna be able to meet you where you're at. So we're gonna put up their information right now. If you want to take a screenshot of it, you want to, write it down, go ahead and flash that for me, Rob. Be sure to check in with them. Yeah, there's their information right there. So be sure to screenshot that, write it down. And if you feel you need any help with, in any kind of mental health or anything, you just want
Just
to
to
talk to them.
consult.
Yeah, just some counsel, just call them, and I'm sure you're going to be in great hands. But other than that, though, man, I almost forgot to tell you guys, man, happy Cinco de Mayo. I hope you guys are all celebrating safely and reasonably, and not out there shooting your pistoleros in the air.
Please
Nothing
don't.
crazy. Because I know when I grew up, man, my family, they'd be outside shooting 30-30s in the
Not even,
air. And
yeah.
I'd be like, dang, it's crazy out here. But yeah, man, it's a big celebration for our peeps today. So happy Cinco de Mayo. And man, I just thank you so much for
Of
sharing,
course.
man. For reals. I
Of
mean,
course.
you're a true inspiration of success and where you're at today and what you're doing and helping people. And can you tell them your current job? Because I didn't. I
So,
mean, if you don't mind.
yeah, no problem. So I have multiple jobs. Um, at one job, I was the clinical supervisor there for the drug and alcohol counselors at the Linwood Jail, meeting the women's needs there, who have substance abuse issues. But I recently took a position as divisional director of the
Mm,
programs, overseeing that one, and then the alternatives to incarceration program at the LAPD Metropolitan Office.
mm.
And then also, it's kind of like a big resource center in El Monte, but it oversees all SPA 3 here in LA. So that's one of my jobs. But then I also work with this agency who treats pregnant women who are pretty much either domestic violence issue or don't really have anywhere to go. So it's kind of like a transitional housing agency for women. So I have a few clients there that I do. They're a Christian organization in Pasadena. And then I have the private practice, which I have some clients there that I see. And then also I work treating sex offenders, like I mentioned, or men convicted, women, and now adolescents, at multiple organizations. So whether that be online or in person, it's a job that I feel like the field sometimes um, they they don't do justice to how much of a privilege it is to actually be doing what we do. I take my job really seriously, and I know that I have the power to influence people for the better and also for the worse if I'm not like really taking it serious. So it's just, all around the board. In some areas I'm doing leadership roles, in other areas I'm just micro level doing clinical work, and I love it. I love doing both. I love building people up, encouraging people, instilling hope, and helping people heal from a lot of the experiences that they've had. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm very busy, in that, but it's all great stuff. Like, like that quote that says, you find something you love, you know, and you do it for work, then you don't have to work a day in your life. And that's really how it feels. I never wake up, and not minimizing, and say, "Man, I gotta go to work." Like, I love what I do. I love, the privilege that I have, and I really feel it's my God-given calling, and so to use it for good, to
Mhm.
influence people for good, to instill wisdom in people sometimes, right? And so I really stay away from a lot of of worldly things, because
Mhm.
I feel like that's the only way that I can really, make an impact. I
Mhm.
can't I have to be able to live that life that I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so I do. I'm blessed. I have a lot of peace, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not really anxious. I'm not really going through struggles. There's always little things, but overall, it's a good life. It's a blessed
Man.
life, It's good.
And I have to ask this. I have to
Yeah.
ask this, and you don't got to go into big old details,
Mhm.
but what's your relationship like with your mom and dad now after,
Yeah.
you achieving what you achieved and them seeing you just grow up to be the awesome young lady that you are today?
Yeah, it's incredible. I have the best relationship with my mom and dad. I I love them very much. I think they're great people, hardworking, good-hearted, genuine people. And we've overcome a lot together, and so
Well, they matured a whole
oh,
bunch as well because you
absolutely.
said they were young. They
And
were 16 when they had you, right?
yeah, and
Or 17?
yeah,
Yeah.
what's amazing is I've been able to also share, what God has done for me, and they've also come to believe. So
Amen.
it's
Wait a minute. That
beautiful.
one right there. We definitely need to get
Yes.
props on that one, man.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Heck yeah.
And all of my siblings as well, little by little, one by
What?
one, I've just been, I took really serious that promise of God that says, when you come to believe and you're that light
Your
in that
whole
house
household
and
will
the
be
whole
saved.
house will be saved. And I would pray that over them all the time for years till I started seeing one by one. And I was like,
That is
whoa,
awesome.
he's faithful,
Yes, he is.
yeah, so he's been amazing. Yeah, we have an incredible relationship.
That
We
is
we're
awesome.
really we're really close.
And your mom and dad, are they still
Oh,
together?
absolutely.
Yeah, because I know you said there was some,
Yeah.
in the early years, but
Yeah. No,
hey,
they've worked.
that's that Mexican strong piece right there too, though. Like, hey,
Yes.
you know what? We're gonna deal with this, but I'm gonna forgive you and move on. That man, that's awesome though, man. That's
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
That is great,
Yep. They've
man.
been they've been together now going on 36 years, So it's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is awesome. That's a beautiful story,
Yeah.
man.
But yeah, the Lord does amazing things, and he continues, continues doing it. So, and I see it happening also in family members, but more than even outside my family with the clients that come to me, it's always just like a divine appointment. It's so incredible the way that happens, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm able to, because in psychology, a lot of the times they tell us like, you can't be proselytizing to people. Don't talk about, your faith, but that's not the case. The spiritual realm is something that is real and is very serious. So I would be doing my clients a disservice if I didn't address that.
yeah,
They come sometimes with their beliefs, but a lot of times they come with no beliefs. So it's
yeah.
like our job as clinicians is to provide perspectives.
Mhm.
So I provide them perspectives, I provide them, knowledge, and then they apply what
Yeah,
is relevant to them.
that's
And
right.
sometimes, I have seen, clients being saved too. And I think it's beautiful,
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
yeah,
There's
good.
a
Look at you.
God gives us wisdom how to deal with these people because, like I said, I've always respected, the different agencies,
Yeah.
policies, and
Yeah.
whatnot. And, I knew my office wasn't the appropriate place for an altar call. And, I learned though, because I know the scriptures pretty,
Yeah.
pretty well. I mean, enough to lead them to
Yeah.
salvation. And I would always tell my clients like certain things like, you know what, I read somewhere or I heard somebody say that, the truth shall set you free. But
Yeah.
what truth is that to you? You know what I mean?
Very
And
subtle.
just settle, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Because God's word says it doesn't return back void. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
it's not
Yeah.
so much of us quoting scripture
No,
by
no,
verse and
no.
whatnot, but when we put God's word into them, it's the Holy Spirit that's going to convict
Yep.
and it's going to teach and it's going to lead. And
Yep.
we sometimes we're just watering the scripture that's was already there, them seeds that were already there, and God does the increase.
Yes, and also
Brother
our
Jose Peremo.
our behavior is literally like the best testimony, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Let's take this call real quick.
Sure.
Let's see. Hold on, brother. Hold on one second. If you could hear me, hold on. Don't go nowhere. I always have to do this crazy thing with the Bluetooth on the first call. It's always that first one. Hold on, brother. Hold on. Okay, let me see. Bam. All right, Jose. Hold on. He should be there now. Jose, are you there? Hello? Jose, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, what's up, my brother?
How you doing? Just calling in to chime in real quick.
Go ahead, brother. You're on. Talk to us.
Yeah. I think the sister said a very important piece as far as being a new believer in Christ. I think that's why a lot of people struggle in their Christianity because they don't realize that we don't know the Bible. And the natural response is to, oh, I'm going to just learn it each and every day. But we actually got to get in the Word and learn what God says about us and who we are and why we do the things that we do and why we struggle. And I think just hearing her speak, she has a very good perspective that we have to learn, study, and show ourselves approved, rightly dividing the word of truth. And I think that's why we see a lot of believers fall because they're not in the word, they're not studying, they're basically white knuckling it, just like in recovery, like you were just mentioning about you were all in. And a lot of people think, oh, okay, I want to get sober, I want a better life, but they're just holding on with dear life. In reality, they have to let go and let God. So I just thought it was beautiful. She's she's doing an awesome work. Even the things that she's studying right now, and she says she's halfway through. I think she's further along than a lot of people out there, and she's going to be a blessing to society and to the church. So I just want
Thank you
to
very much.
encourage you, sister. Sometimes trailblazing is we don't get to see where we're going, but God, if your God is leading you, uh, be sure that God people are going to follow. So continue to do the work.
Thank you
Amen.
very much. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
that.
And this is a brother right here. He did 20, 25 years, Jose?
No, 17.
Oh, 17 years. It seemed like 25. He did 17
Yeah,
years. You
probably.
know what I mean? He was a product of like getting caught up in
Wow.
all that gang stuff. But today
Yeah.
he's pastoring him and his wife.
Praise God.
They're doing a great outreach out there in the Oxnard area.
Mhm.
So just like
Yes.
you come from that, that
Yeah,
crazy life, but God's doing something through him. And
that's
man,
beautiful.
Jose, thank you, brother, for calling in, brother. Appreciate the support, man. And you keep doing what you're doing, man. Give your wife our regards.
Yes, sir. You guys continue on. God bless you.
All
Love
right,
you.
brother. Love you
Thank you.
guys. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that's a good brother right there. Yeah, he was a lifer as well. And man, he's out there now in Oxnard doing
Praise
great things,
God.
man.
Good, good,
Yeah,
good.
they have a lot of different things going on too. They really involved in one of the fire camps out there where they get out where the men get to go
Work
to
camp.
like a work camp,
Hmm.
but it's a fire camp and they help them like righteously get into like the fire department and
That's
whatnot,
beautiful.
different things. So yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, man. So
So,
yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot put out there, man. And like he
yeah,
said, and like you said, man, you're doing a lot, and our community's blessed to have you, serving. And man, I'm just blessed, man.
that's awesome. Thank you, Jojo.
Yeah.
Me too.
So before we cut this and we end today, I usually have our guests, just share one final word if you don't mind looking into this camera. Maybe there's that young daughter out there right now that, is struggling, with their family, with her family, and,
Mhm.
don't, her family's probably discouraging her, why are you going to go to school for? You're not going to amount to nothing. Nobody in this family has ever went to college, so don't think about it or whatnot. But there's probably somebody out there that's probably, going through what you've been through. So if you don't mind, just within a minute or so, just
Yeah.
speak into that camera and give them some hope.
Well, I would say I'd preface it by, using that scripture that says, walk by faith and not by sight. A lot of times when we're really young, we want to see the evidence of what we're going into. We want to see how it's going to come out because we are young. We have a lot of doubt. We need to grow in our faith. and our trust in God. And so what I would say would just be, trust and believe in God's promises for your life. He doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't lie. There's a lot of biblical promises that we can hold on to, in what we're going through, and just really believe. A lot of people believe in God, but they don't believe God. Believe God, you know, and find somebody to mentor you. Find somebody that will believe, that will guide you in those times of weakness, where you're struggling. That isn't always a family member. Sometimes that's, somebody who's already, further ahead. It doesn't even have to be somebody in your same, line of work that you're trying to get into. It could just be somebody speaking life into what you want to do, to give you that hopeful. I learned this saying from Dr. Richie K, my husband, right? He says the way that we speak reflects how we think. And that was very true. That's something that for me, I had to really kind of change the way that I spoke, because I viewed life very negatively because of my experiences. So we have to learn to just speak, positivity, to speak life, to speak encouragement, to speak hope. And then we'll see how our life will just slowly start changing. We don't have to know the outcome of it right now. We just have to trust that it's going to be with purpose and it's going to be good.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. All right, people. Well, we're about to wrap it up. I just wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget, you could go back and replay the video to get her information if you didn't get it. It's right there, probably about, I want to say it's probably like about in the hour and 20 mark. So go back and you'll get the theme. There it is one more time too. So be sure to write down their number, 626-723-8556. And that's Radical Counseling and Consultation. All right. So be sure to, check in with them if you have some, some questions or whatnot. And thank you guys, man. Thank you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for notification reminders. All right. So you guys take care. God bless you. And thank you once again.